In this video, we're going to talk about error correction. We're going to go through the types of errors and also the difference between errors and mistakes, what's a mistake and slip, how or when to correct the mistakes or the errors, okay, and some techniques to correct them, as well as the approach that we should create in our students, their mindset that we should create in our students about errors. So let's go to it. If you notice the screen, we have the error correction for language learners. First of all, we need to understand that errors are not something negative. It's something actually positive because it allows us to understand what we need to change to correct in order to grow and to progress with our language learning. Just like in life, error will tell us what we did wrong and so how to change it as well so we can continue and improve our performance of a language. So let's understand, first of all, an error, I have to define it as the wrong production of a language in any of the skill that is ignored by the learner. This is something important because it is not the same with a mistake. The error is completely ignored. I mean, it comes out of ignorance. Ignorance is not something wrong. I mean, it's the fact that you don't know something. So when we have learners, they don't know about the language. They don't know vocabulary. They don't know structures. And it's common, it's logic, they will make an error. They will commit errors. So let's talk about the types of errors. We have developmental errors. It says these errors are a natural part of a language learning process. Reflecting the learner's current stage of language acquisition, they may include incorrect verb conjugations or sentence structures as the learner navigates the complexities of a target language. For example, when we try to learn, or when we are learning the conjugation of the verbs, it is possible that we try to say the same with all the verbs. For example, if I say played, it's a verb in past, then I will say run, which is a verb, and I make it past. So I'm trying to develop the knowledge, and it becomes an error. But again, it comes out of ignorance. We don't know that part of the rules of a language in verbs. So that will be a developmental error. An interference error, which is the second type of error here. Okay, it says interference errors occur when the learner's native language influences their production or comprehension of a target language, leading to issues with pronunciation, grammar usage, or word choice. For example, it is very common for Spanish speakers to say, how many years do you have, when they're trying to ask, how old are you? Because in the mind, in our Spanish-speaking mind, we say it that way in Spanish, how many years do you have? So the Spanish interferes in the process of language learning for the target language, and we try to translate literal from Spanish to English, and we say, how many years do you have? Instead of the correct form of saying it in English, how old are you? It happens a lot with many other items of the language. So that will be an interference error. Then we have generalization error, and that happens when it says here, overgeneralize a rule or pattern, resulting in incorrect language usage. Okay, in developmental error, like the example I said, the student doesn't know the rule for verbs in past. For example, the difference between play, regular and irregular verbs, play and run. Okay, therefore he's going to go for that error, saying runneth, runned, instead of ran, the irregular verb, because he doesn't know the rule. But in generalization error, the learner has already learned a rule, and he's going to apply it all the time, overgeneralizing it. For example, you teach present simple, and you teach the student that the rule is that you add an S to the verb when you are talking about third person, he, she, or it. So he says, I speak English, he speaks English. And then he does the same when he says, Does he speak English? He can speak English. He should speak English. Then just because he learned the first rule, adding an S in the affirmative form of the verb in present simple, then he's adding the S in the negative form, in the question form, including modal verbs, and he's going to overgeneralize that rule, using it all the time. Okay, that will be a generalization error. Finally, the worst one, the most dangerous one, is the fossilized error. It says fossilization happens when learners persistently make the same errors even after extensive exposure and instruction. These deeply ingrained errors can be challenging to correct and may require specialized intervention. So it could be pronunciation, it could be spelling, it could be grammar, and it is an error that is going to be there forever. Okay, well, I say forever as an expression, but I mean, it's going to be there for a long term, because no matter how many times you explain the student in different error correction techniques and exposing a student to the correct form of a language, he will continually make the same mistake, the same error. That is called a fossil. We all have fossils, actually, I have to say. If we will need to check our language and be aware of that so we could correct ourselves. But we have fossil errors even if in our native language. With pronunciation, with vocabulary, they will be there. Okay, so we need to deal with fossil errors as well. But if they make a big problem in the production of a language, we should have to be very careful or bring some other strategies to correct that error. So these are the types of errors. Then I said we need to understand the difference between an error and a mistake. An error is something that comes out of ignorance. Mistake is something that comes out of misunderstanding or lack of knowledge. Lack of knowledge, difference between ignorance and lack of knowledge is that you know it, but you don't know it completely. You know the rule, but it is not there complete, or you just forgot about that rule. Okay, so that will be a mistake. Again, error comes out of ignorance, mistake comes out of misunderstanding. So it says here, mistakes are errors made due to a lack of knowledge or understanding. They occur when a learner doesn't know the correct form or rule, but has the ability to produce it correctly. That's important. The student can correct it. He already knows, he has already seen it, studied it, watched it somehow, but he has not understood it completely. But he has the ability to correct it by himself. He just needs to be led to that, direct. Okay, that's the difference with the error. The error, the student cannot correct it because he doesn't know it. Now, a slip, it says slips are unintentional errors that occur despite the learner's knowledge of the correct form or rule. And it also happens in Spanish. When we are fluently speaking, we naturally make slips. Okay, we make a mistake, but we immediately correct it. So I don't know, I'm gonna say like, okay, so the teacher teach all the lessons. Sorry, the teacher teaches all the lesson. When we do that, we made a slip. It happened unintentional, but we can immediately correct it. Okay, if you have any question or any comment, leave it in the description and leave it in the comments of the video. Now, when to correct, which has been a big debate, when to correct mistakes of learners. We have immediate correction, we have selective correction, or we have self-correction. It will depend a lot on the context, the activity, the task that we're doing with our students, whether we interrupt or do not interrupt. It also depends a lot on the methodology that we are using to teach. But let's see, immediate correction is, as it says, the student makes an error or a mistake, and we immediately interrupt to correct with whatever technique we have, but we do it immediately. Advantages, the student can be aware in the moment that he made a mistake, so he can correct it. Disadvantages, the student can lose the track of what he was saying and not making only one mistake, but he will continue to make now a bunch of mistakes. When to do immediate correction? Well, it could be when you are one-on-one, when students are working in teams, because you are monitoring and you pass and you can be one-on-one with the student. And that way you do not disconcentrate the student from what he was trying to produce in his mind, but you are like just intervening in the correct moment. But if you have a student passing to the front and giving a speech, you do not do immediate correction. You will prefer to do selective correction, which means you do not correct. First of all, you do not correct all the errors. Possibly they were slips. Possibly they're not errors that have to do with the topic you want to emphasize. Okay, probably made a pronunciation mistake, but you're trying him to produce passive voice. You want to focus on the passive voice usage rather than the pronunciation. So in that moment, I don't mean you should just let it go and never correct it. I mean, in that precise moment, you select which errors to correct. That's why it's called selective corrections. But as well, you do not intervene immediately. You write down the mistake so you can tell the students later about that mistake. Okay, that will be selective correction. Self-correction opportunity, it says, well, encourage learners to self-correct whenever possible, providing opportunities for self-correction. Like, you can also, when they are speaking in front, you can develop a system in which you show a sign, and that could lead the students to know that he made a mistake, and he could probably self-correct. Again, you should be very careful. You should know your students, the abilities of they have in order to do that, okay? But self-correction techniques is like the student makes a mistake, you echo correct. I mean, you say the same with intonation. I don't know. Students say, I go it to shopping. And you said, go it to shopping? And the student says, oh, I went to shopping. Went to shopping? Oh, sorry, I went shopping. So you go echo correcting so the student can understand that he's making a mistake. But you do that when they are mistakes. They can correct by themselves. Something important is techniques of effective error correction. Explicit correction happens when they are making errors, not mistakes. Explicit correction is because they made an error that they ignore, so you cannot lead the students to correct himself because he doesn't know how to correct it. So in that case, you explicitly tell the student, okay, here is the rule. I'm gonna teach you. Okay, did you get it? Good. Next time he makes the same error, it's gonna be a mistake, and you can lead him to correct it because he already knows that. And then it's recast. That's the next one, which I was explaining before. That means echo correction. You say the same with an intonation, leading a student to understand he made a mistake. Or you literally said, for example, the same example, the student says, I go to shopping. You say, I went shopping. Oh, yes, teacher, sorry, I went shopping. You literally say the correct form. Or you use peer correction, leading students, other students, classmates. No, the students say, I go to shopping, and you ask the whole class, is go to shopping correct? What is the correct form of a verb go in past? And they are going to say it. You approach the student that made a mistake, he's going to correct it. Okay, so that's recasting what the mistake was from student. Elicitation says prompt the learner to correct their own error by asking leading questions or providing cues, which I was explaining before. Okay, elicitation encourages active engagement. Instead of saying, I go to shopping, you say like immediately, directly to the student, like, go ahead. What's the correct form of go in past? Go ahead, teacher. Are you sure? Check your verb. Check the list of verbs you have. Lead him. Take him to find the correct form. Okay, that will be elicitation. Okay. Now it says leveraging error analysis for improvement. Okay, we should or we could have some classes that talk about error analysis. Activities, or maybe the whole class is going to be about checking mistakes. Okay, error analysis will lead students to, will foster learners' autonomy. Okay, they will understand how their mistakes have happened so they can correct themselves. Delayed correction is when I said you write down the mistakes they made, so you later will approach it in another session, sorry, or in another activity. You will explain that, okay? Group correction. You can have an activity of error correction, so you on purpose write sentences that are incorrect, and in group, collaboratively, they correct the mistakes. Okay, so that is one of the best activities for students to improve and increase their level of knowledge in the language. Okay, now it says balancing fluency and accuracy. Fluency-focused activities, accuracy-focused activities. What's the difference and tailored approach? Fluency-focused activities, it says, in communicative tasks or conversational practice, it may be more appropriate to prioritize fluency and maintain the flow of communication. Selective correction, remember? If a student is practicing fluency, you select which mistakes to correct. About fluency, about pronunciation, maybe not about grammar, okay? Because you are checking or you are giving emphasis to fluency. Accuracy focused mistakes. And in that way, if it's an oral exam, but he's making pronunciation mistakes, you're not focusing on that. You're focused on the accuracy of the grammar he's using. And again, selective error correction. So depending on your focus, it could be accuracy or it could be fluency. Or it says tailored approach. Effective error correction requires a flexible and adaptive approach. Educators should constantly assess the learning environment. We need to talk about assessment, which will be the next video, the next topic, okay, types of assessment. I will only talk about formative and summative assessment, continuous evaluation, or exams. We are evaluating the production of a language, unless our focus is accuracy, in which we should determine with a grade the progress of a student, then otherwise we are evaluating the ability of a student to produce the language, in which we cannot just give a grade because it will be too subjective. So we should use continuous evaluation techniques, but we will see that in the next class, which is types of assessment. See you in the next video. Thank you very much.